Hello and welcome to another episode of Jews in the World. I'm Phyllis Zimbler Miller, and I have with me today Dr. Rochelle Seidel. She's actually calling in from Brazil today, and we have a very interesting program. She's the founding executive director of the New York-based Remember the Women Institute, which since 1997 has conducted research and cultural activities that include women in history, especially Holocaust history. She is the author of The Jewish Woman of Ravensbrück concentration camp and 3 other Holocaust-related books. Welcome, and let's get right into it. So I learned about her organization because she is doing a very interesting event for Yom HaShoah about women in theater. But before we get into it, I would love her to tell her origin story of Remember Women. So go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Phyllis. Thank you for inviting me. You want the origin story of Remember the Women Institute? Well, it's a long story. It may take up your whole time here. I believe that the origin of the origin was 1980, when I was invited with 2 other journalists, writers for Jewish media, to go to East Germany, the German Democratic Republic. And at that time, nobody in the United States, well, that's an exaggeration, surely somebody did, but basically nobody in the United States ever heard of Ravensbrück Women's Concentration Camp. It was behind the Iron Curtain. It was, I found out later, actually being used as an army base for Soviet soldiers. Like, we had ours in West Germany, they had theirs in East Germany, and it was an army base, and on the site of what had been the concentration camp. And it was not on the itinerary, and we were not supposed to be going there. Now you know why, but I didn't know why. Anyhow, Aviva Cantor, a good friend of mine who is an amazing feminist and knows everything, said, if you're going to East Germany, you really need to go to Ravensbrück Women's Concentration Camp. I had never heard of it. And so we were there for 10 days, and I nagged and nudged, and I told our host, who was also, I suppose, spying on us, that I needed to go to Ravensbrück. And he kept saying, oh, we'll go to Potsdam. It's beautiful. Oh, we'll do this, we'll do that. No. Anyhow, so I was staying an extra day because my cousin was stationed in Vienna from Israel, and I was going to fly over there for the weekend. So I had a day to myself. So I said, you're not going to take me, I'll go myself, which was impossible. The roads were no good, the trains were no good, the German was no good. There was no way I was going to get there. Anyhow, I scared them, so they took me. And well, there was, you could see a lot more now than you could see then, because there were Soviet troops there. I saw a couple at the gate, but I didn't get it. And there was absolutely no indication that a Jewish woman had ever stepped foot in that camp. And our guide there was a communist survivor, and there were a lot of political prisoners in the camp, some of them Jewish. Now, I not knowing anything, but being semi-smart, I said to this survivor, excuse me, but weren't there any Jewish women in the camp? It's a concentration camp. It was the Holocaust, like, maybe. And so she said, well, one of our communist heroes, Olga Benario Prestes, was also Jewish, period. One. Okay, well, that made me start to do some investigating. And I estimate there were, in the whole of, maybe there were 130,000 more or less women in the 5 years of the camp. I estimate 20,000 of them were Jewish. That's a lot of people. I grew up in a small town in upstate New York. It had 20,000 people, the population. So in my head, I imagine like my whole hometown. That's a lot of people. Okay, so I started investigating, but it was hard because it was behind the Iron Curtain, and I wasn't getting too far. And then I was starting my PhD, and I had to have a dissertation. And I said, that was in the later 80s. And I said to my advisor, I wanted to do Ravensbrück concentration camp. And he, of blessed memory, was very smart and said, you don't want to do that. It's too far away. You don't really speak German. It's behind the Iron Curtain. You can't do this. Do it after, do something you can do for your dissertation, then do it. So I kind of got sidetracked. And I did my dissertation on the Museum of Jewish Heritage in New York, how it was created, the politics behind it. Okay. Then 1989 happened and the wall fell down. And this camp memorial, which is about 50 miles from Berlin, it didn't move, obviously. It stayed put, but it moved west. Okay, it moved west. And they started redoing it. And I went back. I've been there about 6 times. I don't know if I went back once before this, but I know I went in 1994, and they were redoing everything. There was now a Jewish exhibit, because before that, it was by countries. And you know, if you were a Jew, you were Polish or you were Hungarian, or whatever. They didn't care if you were Jewish. And now there was a Jewish display, and they were working on it. It wasn't done. Okay. And I saw and I talked to people, and the next year was 1995. And I was gathering names of survivors, but not in a very organized way, all along. But in 1995, I went to the 50th anniversary, which was a big deal. And I was alone, and I was in the hotel.
Wait, let
And
me
actually,
clarify the 50th anniversary of the liberation of the
oh,
camp.
I'm sorry, the liberation of the camp, yes.
Yes, okay, keep
April, it
going.
was April 30th, 1945. Sorry, you're right.
Okay.
Yes, 50th anniversary of liberation. I left that out. So I was in the hotel basically by myself. And I asked, well, to tell the whole story, it was Passover. And I asked if there was any provision for Passover food, because I thought my matzah and cheese might run out before I left. And the woman at the desk said to me, oh, go over to such and such a table. That's where the Israeli delegation is. Well, I almost fell over because I didn't know there was going to be an Israeli delegation. And then I met all these wonderful Jewish survivors from Israel. There were also some from other places, including the United States and Canada, but this was a big delegation, and they adopted me, and I stayed with them on their bus. And from that, I started interviewing them, and they gave me other names. And then the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum helped me find some survivors in the United States. And then I sent questionnaires around. I even got questionnaires back from Australia, and I didn't know anybody in Australia, but a survivor in California sent to her friend in Australia, who sent to other friends. Anyhow, so I really did a lot of interviewing of survivors. At one point, I had to have 2 assistants help me in New York. I just couldn't get it all done. So that's how it started. And at some point during all this, was actually my brother-in-law said, you know, you're doing all this, and you really should make an organization, a research organization, not for profit, so that you can, try and get some donations for your work and try and make it more, more formalized. So I did. It's a lot of work. If you've done it, you know it's a lot of work to get a 501c3, but I did it. And that's how it started. So it started because of my research on Ravensbrück, and I completed it with having Remember of the Women Institute as part of the research. And then we started doing a lot of other things. And my book came out, I think, in 2004, without looking, The Jewish Women of Ravensbrück Concentration Camp, from University of Wisconsin Press.
So, okay, that's a good origin story.
Is that okay?
And I can really relate to it because my husband and I were stationed in Munich with the U.S. Army from September 1970 to May of 72. And he was his military intelligence, he had a security clearance, and I did, so we couldn't go anywhere in Eastern Europe. And I do know that in those years when communism, in the Iron Curtain, the Jews were not separated as victims.
Right.
they were just Russians or whatever. And that it's
Correct.
only after the fall of the wall that Jews have been given their and I hate to say it's not proper place, but their historic place.
Right.
So I'm very impressed with what you did. I want to talk now to make sure we get it in. Let's talk about May 5th, and we're going to include the link.
May
Uh,
6th.
oh, May 6th. Okay, May 5th is Yom HaShoah, but May 6th is the date of, she's going to tell you about her program.
No, May 6th is Yom HaShoah, starting the night of May 5th. And our program is the end of Yom HaShoah on May 6th. So we've been doing for a number of years two related projects on women, theater, and the Holocaust. One of them is a resource handbook that lists plays by women about the Holocaust, plays about women in the Holocaust, and some wonderful personal essays by people who have been working on the subject. And you can find that online at rememberwomen.org. It's free. And last year we did a really updated one. It was more interactive and whatever. This year we did not update. We're starting to do it during the year, and we hope to have it ready for next year, Yom HaShoah. So that's half of what we do. But the more I think interesting, perhaps, although that's not fair, project we do is an actual evening of dramatic readings related to women, theater, and the Holocaust. I didn't count the years, I'm sorry, but we've done it for a lot of years, so that I know that in 2020 we didn't do it, the beginning of the traumatic beginning of COVID. But after that, the next 2 years we did it on Zoom, 21, 22, 23, we went back to being live. And at the JCC, the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan on Amsterdam Avenue, 76th Street. And this year we are live again there, hoping it should be recorded. And so it will be on our website afterward. So this year, you want me to tell it?
Yes.
Okay. We have, I think Phyllis is going to show you at some point the registration. No, you're not.
I'm going to include
the link.
Yes, when I upload this to YouTube, the link will be.
Oh, okay, got it. Okay. The link is from the JCC. It's also on our website. You can find that too on rememberwomen.org. You can under events, you can find the link. So, okay, we have 4 segments, 4 wonderful readings. And the first one is by Emily Mann. And if you don't know the name, you should Google Emily Mann, because you should know her name. She is a very long-term veteran, wonderful, famous playwright and director, and sometime actor, not a lot, but with every prize on Broadway, off Broadway. She ran the MacArthur Theater in Princeton for decades. And she is coming herself and doing the reading from one of her earliest plays that she wrote called Anula. And Anula is about a Jewish woman who posed as a non-Jew in Nazi Berlin. And so she will be doing that. There's 4 separate readings, about 15 minutes each. So she will be first. I thought she should be last for dessert, but she has to leave early because she's getting a prize from some prestigious. So we're allowing her to leave. And before I go to the other ones, there's a talk back afterward with some of the playwrights and directors. And we're going to have with us Alexis Green, who wrote a wonderful biography of Emily Mann. I've just finished reading the book. And Emily said to me, Alexis knows me better than I do, so it's okay. So we have that. And then Cindy Cooper, Cynthia L. Cooper, is a wonderful playwright who's worked with us for years, every year. I can't do this without her. And she wrote an original short play that is kind of a spin-off from, because it's an imaginary kind of scene that she wrote, between Gemma LaGuardia Gluck and her brother Fiorello. LaGuardia, who was the mayor of New York City during most of World War II, and right afterward, he became the head of UNRWA. It's not the same as the Palestinian one. It's an R instead of a W or something, but it was the United Nations resettlement something. And so this is a discussion between the brother and sister in Ravensbrück, which never happened. And Gemma was in Ravensbrück. She wrote a memoir, and I actually edited the second version of her memoir, and that's what this kind of was taken from. Yes.
Question, because I've just been listening to the musical Fiorello for over and over. I don't know why recently. Why was she in Ravensbrück?
Okay, I was going to say that. Okay. All right. First place, Fiorello and Gemma are Jewish according to Jewish law, as well as Nazi law, which is probably a more important distinction in this case, because their mother was Jewish. She was an Italian Jew named Irene Cohen. Her mother's maiden name was Luzzatto, which is probably the most famous Italian Jewish name that there is in history. Now, Irene Cohen married an Italian Catholic, and they came to America, and both Gemma and Fiorello were born in New York. But when the father, Achille, retired, they went back to Italy. They were in Trieste or near Trieste. And Gemma made some money by giving English lessons. And one of her students was Hermann Gluck, who was a Jewish Hungarian man. And they got married, and she moved back to Budapest with him and even took her mother with her. They had two girls in Budapest. The Nazis came knocking on Gemma's door very early, because if you know the history of the Hungarian Jews, Budapest was the last place that was deported. It was all around and not Budapest. But they came very early to her in the spring of 44, and they wanted her as a political hostage. They wanted her because of her brother. So that it came out later in 61 in the Eichmann trial with some documents. It's documented that she was picked up to be a political hostage that might be exchanged for somebody they wanted. So that is how she ended up in Ravensbrück, and she did. And she was old. She was 63. This is like ancient in a concentration camp.
Yes.
You can't live. But because they wanted her alive, she didn't do slave labor. And she had her own bed. Two big deals, really.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
she did what she did. She gave out some Red Cross packages and divided them up. She was kind of in charge of that for her barrack. And she was in charge of the table to eat, and she took care. And they loved her. I mean, she also gave English lessons. They loved her very much because they called her Mutti, mother in German. I mean, they called her Mutti. They didn't have any Mutti, and she said, I felt like they were my children, because she was much older. So that's how she ended up in Ravensbrück. It was a weird case. I mean, not a normal one at all.
And that's the name of this play that's going to be done. The second one of your plays is called English Lessons.
It's called English Lessons because she gave English lessons, but it's I don't want to give it away. It's very well done and very, very, very imaginative and very nice.
Okay, so now let's move on to the third one.
Oh, okay. The third one is from Nava Semmel's book. Nava Semmel, who was a dear friend of mine and died of cancer very young, in her early 60s, a wonderful, brilliant, creative, imaginative Israeli author, playwright, educator, second generation activist, everything. And she wrote a lot of books, even some children's books. And this one, And the Rat Laughed, was also made into an opera. And I just was talking to an Israeli director, and he said he did it as a play in Slovenia, which was news to me. I was like, in Slovenia? Okay. Anyhow, so the book And the Rat Laughed is available in English translation. I highly recommend it. It's very imaginative. It goes to the past, it goes to the future. This part of it is not doing the futuristic part of the book, but you can't, I mean, in 15 minutes. But it's basically a grandmother trying to explain things to her granddaughter. And this grandmother was a hidden little 6-year-old, 7-year-old, something like this, girl in a potato pit in Poland. And she was sexually violated by the farmer's daughter of the family that was hiding her. And, and she's very, how can I tell this story? How can I tell this story? So that is excerpts from Nava Semmel's book, And the Rat Laughed. And last is also, it's a play based on a book. Letters to Sala is the play. The book is Sala's Gift by Ann Kirshner, and it's about Ann Kirshner's mother. Ann will be with us, I believe, for the evening. And Arlene Hutton wrote a play. She's connected with the Barrow Group, which is a dramatic organization, and they did the play off Broadway. I read on their website, they've done it in 100 different places and schools and around and whatever. And so 4 actors are doing the readings about Sala, who was in a lot of work camps and somehow managed to save letters. And when she was basically dying, she shared it with her daughter, Anne. It's now, Anne gave it to the New York Public Library, to their archives, but Anne meanwhile wrote this book and Arlene wrote the play. And so that's the 4th one. I mean, all 4 of them are about women that somehow survived, and they were in very different circumstances, and lived to tell their story. And I think that it's kind of inspirational beside everything else.
Very inspirational. And I'm very pleased that there is going to be a recording afterwards for those of us
Me
who
too.
cannot be in New York, because as Rochelle knows, I have a nonfiction Holocaust play, Thin Edge of the Wedge, which includes testimony by both women survivors and saviors. So this is a subject very close to my heart. I hope it's listed on our database. We haven't checked
We
yet.
better check it out. If not, we'll add it.
Okay. And it's
I think I did.
yeah, and it comes from the fact that, having lived in Germany, when I came back to the United States in the 70s, I worked at a Jewish newspaper, Philadelphia Exponent. I was editor of the literary supplement, and I started publishing these firsthand accounts almost before anyone did. I didn't know that it wasn't yet done. And
that's why I know you from the Jewish Journalist Association from 100 years ago.
The Jewish Exponent.
Yes.
Is that how you? Okay, then I'm going to share online, but not giving a name. So after I had edited, I had a BA in journalism at the point, and I taught copy editing at the college at Temple University Extension. I went to the editor then of the Jewish Publication Society, and I said, look at these accounts. I've edited them, I think they should be published. And you know what the answer was? No, they're not written by professional writers.
Oy.
So that was the 70s. And then, of course, when the TV show Holocaust came out, it changed things a little bit. But I just so admire what you've been doing, because the women need to get their due. And they're still not necessarily getting their due.
It's better, but it's better.
Right. Particularly in
I just saw something. It's not fair because it was the article was here in Brazil in Portuguese, and sometimes well, this isn't nice to say, but sometimes things are ahead in the United States. But it was asking 2 Brazilian Holocaust scholars, one a woman, to name their 10 best movies about the Holocaust that they would recommend, and all 10 were man-centered. Not one was woman-centered. And I went crazy.
Okay, so I just want to say this. I would go, Tracy. What I didn't add is, so when I got to Philadelphia, we came back from Germany. My husband's from Philadelphia. I was asked to join the second Jewish women's movement in the country. The first one was in New York. The second was in Philadelphia. We even had a conference, and Bella Absa came. So I've been a long time Jewish feminist. So it would drive me crazy too, because I'm always watching how women are portrayed and compared to men. So I hope you wrote someone something. I think
I didn't. I got to write it in Portuguese. It takes me some time.
well, I'm impressed you know Portuguese. So we're coming close to the end. What should we share with our readers that they might not know, or they wish they knew about your work or Ravensbrück, or whatever you want to share?
Well, I don't, standing on one foot, right? Well, I mean, what we're basically, everything that we do is trying to integrate women's stories into Holocaust history. This is what we try to do. We try to send out an e-blast that tells the stories of some specific women or something that, talking, going around to whatever universities. And we did a wonderful art exhibit in 2018 in a gallery in New York City called, I do know what I need to talk about, Violated Women in Holocaust and Genocide. And one of the things, we were the first, now it's gotten more in vogue, interestingly, but in 2010, remember the Women Institute co-published with Brandeis University Press a book edited by Dr. Sonia Hedgepath and myself, Sexual Violence Against Jewish Women During the Holocaust. So we really, since then, one of our specialties has been sexual violence. And it's interesting, now it's kind of become a hot subject. And of course, after this October 7 sexual violence, I think that maybe made it more, more prominent. And I did write a couple of op-ed pieces in the Times of Israel, after October 7, somehow relating it, because I could do that in English. Yeah.
Okay, so I really encourage my listeners, if you're in New York, I mean, I would love to see this in person. I will have to settle for the recording, but I just really want to thank Dr. Rochelle Seidel for all this really important work, bringing women out of the shadows in connection to the Holocaust, and remembering that women they resisted, they did all kinds of things that perhaps history books don't include. And that whenever we can share this information, whether we're teachers or journalists or something, it's something that we can do. And we have the resources at rememberwomen.org. So I thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. And I thank our listeners. And I just say, not only remember the Jews and the women in the past, but remember the Jewish women today, including the hostages, and bring them home.
Yes. Amen.